So we're really excited today. We're hearing from some of our top leaders at BSN from all different departments with really dynamic, varied backgrounds. But before we really jump into the panel, quick background on WERC. If you're not familiar, it's the Women's Professional Development Group here, but everyone is welcome. We've had Dr. Julie Bell speak on building confidence. We have that recorded. We can share that if you missed that. We've also had a LinkedIn workshop, so if you need a little help on your LinkedIn profile, we also have that recorded as well. And we have our LinkedIn expert here, Tiffany Madden. She will personally help you. You're welcome. And we did LinkedIn headshots. So if you need a new headshot, we might do round 2 later on. Can't make promises, but Brandis, our professional photographer who does all of our photography for our catalogs and our website, everything, she's really talented. She donated her time to do LinkedIn headshots. So hopefully we can do that again so more people can take advantage. And then last but not least, but one of my favorites, we do workout and wind downs. We've done Tai Bo here, Erin Linsky from Under Armour. That's what she does, not as her full-time job, but she did a Tai Bo class here, really fun. There was like 35 people here punching the air. And then we also did a HIIT class, so we have a yoga class coming up. Julianne's husband's gonna do it for us. We'll do it in the atrium. Julianne Michaels' body shred class. Julianne's mother is doing it. And then we'll have a Pilates class as well later this fall. We also will do one more speaking series with a big speaker, TBD yet, but we will announce who that's gonna be before the end of the year. So let's jump into this panel. Really excited. We did send the bios out on everyone, so I'm not gonna go in depth on everyone, but if you're not familiar with these faces, we have Martha May, our new Chief People Officer, Chief of Human Resources of Varsity Brands. So she is, a big part of BSN. Really excited to have Martha here, and we'll get to hear, her background and advice from her today. Jared Drinkwater, my boss, Chief Marketing Officer, worked with him for a while at Pizza Hut as well. We also have Sydney Harris. She is VP of Supply Chain Transformation. I had to look because I didn't even know. She'll tell us a little bit about her background and how she ended up there. And then we also have Megan Kane. She's VP and Associate General Counsel for Varsity Brands. She oversees BSN Sports. That means she's a lawyer and she's really smart. And then we have Meredith Nolan. She is the OG of BSN. She's been here for 14 years, worked her way up from TM all the way up to RSM. So really excited to have Meredith here. Most love for Meredith. So we'll jump into the questions, but I first really want to thank everyone who RSVP'd, submitted questions, and we were blown away at the thoughts and just insights that you wanted to learn. You guys developed better questions than I could have ever come up with. In fact, my question isn't even on here because the questions were better than my question. So let's jump into it. This first one is for Martha. And it's all about intention. We hear a lot that starting your day and how you start your day really sets intention for how it can go. So how do you attack your day in the morning? Do you have a routine? Tell us about how you set that intention.
So my intention is variety. Let me start there. And by the way, we should do the goat yoga thing when we do the yoga. That'd be kind of fun, huh? So I don't ever do things the same way. At least I set the intention to not. So I don't drive to work the same way, which, by the way, when we were talking about this a little bit earlier, is very different than some of my colleagues. But part of it is just variety. I think I got that from very early, wanting to have this insatiable learning. So I do start with music every day, though. So for me, like turning on music, it like kicks me into gear, and I always sort of half asleep, get a cup of coffee. So caffeine is also a requirement. That's my sort of intention piece for starting my day.
Thank you. Anyone else do something drastically different?
I do, 100% different. I have the exact same routine every single day, and that includes hitting the snooze button 3 times. So I go through the same thing. I'll pet my dogs, say see you later, stop at Starbucks on my way in. That's my one vice I've got. And then come here and start the morning the same way every day. I am actually best in the morning, but for me it's like having that consistency allows me to then be ready to go for the meetings here this morning. So that's me. Yeah.
I'm the typical type A lawyer, organized, and I wake up and kind of have me time, get my house and my personal life organized, and head to work. On my way to work, I try and come up with 2 goals. Like, what are 2 things I want to accomplish today? It makes me feel good at the end of the day that I've done 2 things. So, the opposite of Sydney there. Not on the completing things, on the organized.
It's really finding what works for you. So if you feel kind of out of balance in the middle of the day, look back to how you started it and see if something shifted and your energy just wasn't where you wanted it to be, and just be intentional the next day to do it different. That'd be my counsel.
Thanks. So if you haven't noticed, we're going to start with some soft ones and we'll build up. But thank you.
They get much tougher.
Yes. So next question, boss, Jared. You have a really long background, not just working at BSN, you were at Frito, working at large corporate companies, Yum. So you've worked with a lot of different leaders, and you've also been in a lot of different leadership programs. What would you say are the top 5 characteristics of great leaders that you think people can develop those traits?
Yeah, so I'll throw out a few, and then I think it would be great to get other folks' perspective. But for me, the handful that I would single out, I mean, a leader does a lot of good things, but first and foremost, empowerment. So all the great people that I've worked for they'll help you set the objective, and then they'll get out of the way and let you figure out how to do it. And that, to me, having been led for a long time, I mean, that's fun, figuring out a way to do it. So empowerment and letting your team kind of run, even if they do it a certain way that you might not have done it, I think is really important. 2, great leaders are passionate about what they do. When you think about it, if you're working for a leader that isn't passionate, that doesn't come to work excited every day, how are they going to expect you to be excited? So I think having a genuine passion for what you do and how you do it is really important. I think, at the end of the day, hiring people that are smarter than you, as evidenced by Susan. But honestly, great leaders will surround themselves with really good people, and they won't be afraid of whether or not that person's going to jump them. You take the sports analogy, and you guys might hate it because I'm Patriots fans, but you think about Bill Belichick, and a great leader can often be assessed by how many people that worked for him or her have gone on to do amazing things. And the amount of coaches that have worked under Coach Belichick that have gone on to be head coaches and have done great things is enormous. And then lastly, great leaders make you feel good. And so they can be tough, they can deliver pointed feedback, but at the end of the day, a great leader should inspire and make you feel good when you walk out. So not just telling you what you did wrong, but really starting with what you did right and then building on it to make those ideas and to make you even better. It's just a few.
Has that come over time, Jared, for you, kind of building that? Because I've heard a few of those from you, and building kind of those are the characteristics you look for. Have you shaped those from previous bosses and also kind of learned from the not so great?
Yeah, I mean, I think no doubt it's a collection of the experiences that I've had, and I have jotted down and kind of taken mental notes of all the great things that people I've worked for have done. And then conversely, I've learned probably even more valuable lessons from not so great leaders. And sometimes learning what not to do is just as powerful as learning what to do. So without a doubt, it's been a collection over the last 20 years or so.
Anyone else have anything to add on that? Just what they've learned in their respective job and growing. Meredith?
I've learned that being kind of a chameleon has really been beneficial, and specifically what I do, that not everybody learns the same or takes criticism or gets coached the same. So where I used to kind of live off of the do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, it's really learning how they really want to be talked to or how they want to be treated or how they learn and trying to, build on that. So.
That's a really good point, because we don't raise our kids the same way either, right? They're all very different, and you have to manage those relationships differently. I would just add, that's a great list. Vulnerability. The great leaders I've had the ability to actually admit when they were wrong. And it was so powerful because they became very human, because we all get it wrong sometimes. And a leader I had at one organization was a former Army Ranger, and he came into the organization, and it was in a kind of a not so great state, and he stood at the front of the room and said, I am accountable for everything that fails to occur, or all the successes go to my people, but all the failures come to me first, because I'm in charge. And that's a really powerful way to stand up and take accountability as well. So that's been a trait I've seen and really try to model after.
That's great. Lots of things to just be aware of with people you want to work with and what you want to emulate and grow into. So this next one is very relevant to work in our mission and just the sports industry in general. So I'm going to throw this one at Megan. She worked in the NFL for a while, and she's also in just a profession that is more male-dominated. So as a female professional, what challenges have you faced when growing your career in male-dominated environment?
We're really getting to the harder questions quick. So I've been asked this question a ton of times coming from the NFL. My group at the NFL actually was primarily female. So the example that I use starts back from when I was a baby lawyer at 25. I was going to one of my first hearings and showed up in a small town in Florida, and the judge and the other attorney are talking to each other, buddy, and they go, oh, little lady, go sit up and be a court reporter over there. So traditionally, the lawyers are men and the court reporters are female. But clearly, that's changing. I just said, oh, no, sorry, I'm the attorney, and went to my table, went through, did the hearing, held my head high, won a hearing I wasn't supposed to win. And afterwards, the judge asked me to stay behind. And I thought I was getting in trouble. I hadn't done a ton of hearings. I thought I did something wrong. But he wanted to pull me aside and say, I really appreciated how you handled that. You didn't embarrass me. I really learned a lesson today. If you have respect for yourself, other people will respect you. And so that judge learned that women can be lawyers that day, and I learned a lesson that I could have been mad, I could have yelled at him, and that wouldn't have gotten anywhere either. I don't know if anyone else is adding on this one.
Meredith, you've been here for 14 years.
I have, and I started as a territory manager, and traditionally most of the coaches that we were calling on were men, even for the female sports. I mean, I was an athlete in high school back in my glory days, but a lot of sports that I didn't know a lot about. I love watching football, I love watching baseball, and my friend Kathy teaches me most of everything that I know. But when I talk to a coach, people like talking about what they do and themselves. So just tell me more about that. I'm a little naive, or tell me how that play works. And when you expose your vulnerability, or you expose where you don't know as much, they want to help teach you. It kind of gives them a sense of empowerment, and they really kind of take to you, is what I've learned, specifically with my one-on-one dealings with coaches and even the males that I work with and that I manage. So.
That's a great way of just bringing it back. Like, everyone has their insecurities and, might not know how to approach a situation. So you just have to be humble and be aware and get to know people as people. Yeah.
And just assume positive intent, right? I love that story about that judge, right? And you might have gotten a different outcome on that case had you reacted differently, right? So some of it is just starting with the assumption, even if you believe all the facts suggest otherwise, choose to believe and assume positive intent, and it's amazing how it can shift your perspective and ultimately others' behaviors. I sat around the table for many years in aerospace and defense with only males and myself. And many people before me felt like they needed to behave like them to fit in. And I just decided I was going to be me. And that was probably the most freeing thing I could do. And it was amazing how your influence increases when you relax into your own skin and engage.
Yeah, I also have an example of this specifically. So I will say, growing up in supply chain and distribution, also pretty heavily male dominated. And I will be totally transparent. I've had some amazing leaders, along my journey. And the one example that resonated with me when talking about this question specifically is there was an opportunity that was posted. It was a position, fairly high position in one of the companies I was with. And I was told by my boss that you don't get to apply for it. But what was interesting is the group of people, the externals that they were bringing in to apply for that role, actually many of them were in the role I was in previously at my other company, and one guy actually took my spot so I could join this company. So what I did is I went to my boss and had a pretty open conversation of, this is the role, this is the requirements, and you're telling me that I don't have the experience and I'm not ready, but you're interviewing people who have less experience than I do. And we actually had a great conversation. But I think the point of this is, we all have to be open and honest with our leaders. And when things aren't maybe presented or the opportunity is passing you by, if you don't at least have a voice, and at the end of the day, even if I wasn't able to apply for it, which I ultimately was, but even if not, at least I can look myself in the mirror and say, I did what I thought was right. So, I've had like I said, many amazing leaders, both male and female, who've been so supportive, but there are those times that you are gonna face these challenges, and it's really how you handle it, and I wasn't upset, I wasn't emotional, I was just bringing facts and sticking to those facts. So that was my story for that.
Great. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. So this one, and this is perfect, kind of transitioning. Meredith, we were talking about this earlier. There's ups and downs to your career. And Meredith's grown her career here since she was 27 years old. And, you have off months, you have off weeks, you have off years, which she openly shared with me. But what's the best piece of advice that you've gotten from leaders or managers that you've had here?
Kind of to build on what Sydney was saying, it's you step back and you think people are just going to notice that you're doing a good job or you're hardworking, and I've really learned that you really should tell people, hey, what do I do? What do I need to do? I want to advance. I want to do different things. You've got to express that. So I had a conversation, I don't know, probably about 4 or 5 years after I was here with Jason Stolley, and he's probably given me the best advice so far. He said, you need to go reach out to the people that you want to be like or you want to be in their department. You need to ask them, what can I do? Let me help. Let me do extra things for you. Let me work on projects. Let me do whatever I can, but you have to be present and noticeable. I guess you have to let people know what you want to do and what your intentions are. Instead of sitting back and saying, well, I worked hard today, I did everything that I was supposed to do, surely someone's going to notice that. So it was just really reaching out and letting people know I'm interested. I want to move up. I have desires and things that I want to achieve, and if they don't know that, they don't know what they don't know. So that was probably the best advice.
What role were you in then 4 to 5 years ago? And
I was in a territory manager role, and that's where I started, and did that for 12 years. And it was about the time that BSN and Nike teamed up to be partners. And I remember distinctly having a meeting with Adam Blumenfeld and our entire group of territory managers, and he said that no one in Nike stays in the same position for 3 years. So my expectation for all of you in this room is to start reaching out and doing different things. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do that. And I applied for several jobs and, unfortunately didn't get any of them. But I think a lot of it had to do with no one knew that I wanted to do that, other than you just apply for the job. But there's a dozen people applying for the job. Have you ever gone and talked to anybody outside of just the interview process or the application piece? Let them know what your intention is. So it was just my intention to try to move around, and it didn't work out. And so here I sat with a room full of VPs. So.
Yeah, I think that really applies to networking, and it helps. Maybe you don't know what you want to do, but the more you talk to people about what they do and network, it can really end up opening doors that you didn't expect.
So I'll share just a couple pieces of advice that I've gotten over the years in my career that I try to apply. The first especially in new roles, and even more so, even if you've been in a role for 15 years, listen more than you talk. When you're starting out in a new role, you might intuitively think that you need to prove yourself, and so you got to talk a lot. I mean, I got it actually in a much more direct way. Shut the F up for the first 6 months in your new job. And honestly, I think it's true. I mean, just listening and learning and absorbing, it'll make those times where you speak up that much more powerful. And then the second one I got was actually from the former CEO of Pepsi, amazing guy. And he said that when you see someone on your team or in the organization that's really passionate about something, try to get out of the way and let them go do it. And I remember we were in a meeting once, and someone came in to present an idea that the CEO had really no desire to fund or support coming into the meeting, but the presenter was so passionate that he said, you know what, go do it. And so to the extent you're leading or managing and you see someone that's super passionate, do everything you can to just kind of get out of the way and watch what they can do.
The next question's for you, Jared, and it actually connects to networking and maybe getting out of your comfort zone to talk to people, to figure out what's next. So what's your best advice on establishing and growing relationships in the workplace?
Yeah, so I think the first piece of advice I have here will sound really intuitive, but oftentimes it's not. Take a genuine interest in the life of the person that you're trying to establish the relationship with. I think in a busy office environment, oftentimes you can just go right to the task at hand, but just taking pause and asking someone about their family or their hobbies or what gets them motivated, that can go a really long way in developing a relationship. I'd say the second one for me, reliability. So you're early on, you're trying to develop a relationship with somebody, maybe you sign up for a task, just be reliable, do it, and go above and beyond, and that'll impress. And then the last thing I would say is recognition. I mean, when a person does something good, recognize them, say something, write a note, copy their boss on it. People love and crave recognition, and I think we don't do enough of it. So just a few things I think as you're early on building relationships to think about.
Anyone else want to build on that in terms of relationship builders?
I will, just because I've been here for 14 years. I've really taken the time to get to know a lot of our different departments and the leaders in those departments and even the people that work underneath those leaders, because I feel like you have a true understanding of how each of those departments work, then we understand how we work together. And for me as a manager, it's really helped me explain to my employees or my reports that they don't understand. It's really easy to point fingers and say, well, this department didn't do this, and now I can't this. But if you can help them understand, well, this is why this happens, or explain the entire process, it really kind of connects the bridge for them. Then they're a little less judgy, first of all, but then maybe they will try a different route in fixing the situation or helping avoid a potential catastrophe with a customer on our end anyway. So just getting to know each department and understanding that, and it kind of works twofold, because then you might really understand that you like a different department and what they're about and what they're doing, and it kind of goes back to letting someone know, I'm really interested in this, I think, so I want to get to know more about what they're doing, and it may be a degree or a path that I want to take on my career. So I think it's very important to build the bridges between each of the departments. More than anything, it just gives you a full understanding of how we all operate to make this ship move in the right direction. So.
Great application.
I would just add that if you're going out to meet people, figure out what they need. Figure out how you might help them, because that will go a long way. If you can help them solve a problem they've been trying for months to solve, and you have a piece of that puzzle, by golly, when you come back and say, I could use a little bit of your help, they're much more apt to want to do it.
That's great. So next one is on professional goals and just getting to that next step. Megan, this is for you. One of the questions we got was, what's kind of is there a cookie cutter way to reach the next professional step? Is it education? Is it experience? Is it both?
No. I'll speak with my experience. Education really gets you in the door. I need a JD to practice and be a lawyer, but hard work will really get you to your goals. But a lot of people don't know I was hired at the NFL as a temp in the first year. I did not go to an Ivy League law school. They had only hired Ivy League lawyers, and they weren't willing to take the risk on me. So the education kind of got me in the door, but my hard work got me hired.
So I would say both. And the reason I say that, so I also graduated law school, not a lawyer. I'm in supply chain. But when I graduated law school, to be totally candid, I knew from like my inner being that I did not want to be a lawyer. And I knew in 5 years I would have hated my life had I pursued that path. So then the million-dollar question is, well, now what? And I remembered thinking back, I played tennis in college, and my best time was being part of a team. And so I wanted to go learn how to lead a team, and that's where I eventually wound up working for Target in this distribution center that I didn't even know what they did. But, what they said to me, and the reason they hired me was because they look for a certain skill set. They were like, we can teach you the technical aspects of the job, but we are looking for leaders that will grow and develop. And that was the one thing I will give Target a ton of credit for. They develop their people, and it is very thoughtful. And, as I continue to progress and work really hard, like Megan, good things happen. And sometimes my career path took a very different curve than maybe I had anticipated. So I had to go over here to go up or go get more unique experiences. But at the end of the day, all of the experiences I've had, it's because of both the degree, but at the same time, if you're not willing to put in the work for it, you're not going to go anywhere either,
So I started out as a math major, which for anybody who's been around me more than 10 minutes, that is not where I graduated. I was great in high school at math. I was terrible in college. The second time around in calculus, I thought this is probably not a good strategy. So I shifted to communication and found that it was I was passionate about it, but I was scared to death to speak in public. And I remember that was a requirement to graduate. And by the way, I only have an undergraduate degree in communication. All of my sort of career progression has been because people took a chance on me and invested in me, and I worked hard when I got those opportunities. I like to think of careers as like a rock wall. So if you think about a rock climbing wall, you have to have a pretty decent amount of upper body strength, right, to really kind of get yourself to the top. A lot of us stand at the bottom and we map out our path, right? And we presume for a moment that everybody's goal is the top. It's not necessarily, right? You get to set your own goals. But we have a plan when we get on the wall, and inevitably, every time I've tried to do rock climbing, I vary from the plan, right? I have to go sideways or down, to your point, to get to the goal. And I would just say, we undervalue lateral moves. So the earlier point of learn other pieces of the business, because then you can put pieces together and you have more value you can contribute. I remember as a fleet service clerk, literally, I brought airplanes in, my first job out of college, actually while I was still in college, with those lighted wands at night at the airport for American Airlines. Little did I know that I was going to have a 19-year career there and have 17 different jobs, maybe kind of like Nike, where I moved around a ton. But what I learned was that later, when I got a general manager job running an airport, do you know where my credibility came from? It wasn't my degree. It wasn't the employee relations jobs I had. It was because I'd done their work. I'd sat in their shoes. So I highly, highly recommend that you think about lateral moves and don't just think career progression is up. That whole career lattice is a whole nother way to think about it versus a career ladder.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to this stuff, which is great, the way I look at education might get you in the door, might put your resume above somebody else's. Once you're in the door, honestly, it doesn't mean anything. Your accomplishments are 100% what are going to get you to where you want to go. And so as you set up earlier in your career, take jobs or assignments where there's kind of like a tangible, objective outcome. You can measure the accomplishment, just start building wins. And I promise you, for me, I'd rather have somebody that's proven themselves in the trenches and has a bunch of accomplishments to somebody that graduated from Harvard any day of the week. And so everybody in the room here, you're in the door. And so now it's just, what are you going to accomplish to get to the next level? Because we're not looking at education from here on out. It's what you actually go do.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I want to add one thing, Susan.
Yeah.
In education, sometimes doesn't have to cost anything. I mean, hanging around Tiffany and talking to Eric Harper and those guys, it's just never stop learning, right? It's listening to the TED Talks or something else that you find passion in on podcasts or audiobooks or whatever. I mean, I get held hostage every day by 3 tiny humans, so I don't have time to read. But I'll listen in my truck to a book or something, and it really kind of enlightens or makes you think about one thing that you want to learn about. The internet doesn't lie. You can learn anything on the internet, so it doesn't have to cost anything. So I just say that it's just never stop learning. It doesn't necessarily have to be a degree or something that costs money, but just always learn something. So.
This next question is a really hot topic. It's about the imposter syndrome. Many leaders are talking about the imposter syndrome as they grow in their career. You can experience it at any level. Doesn't matter if you're in a corner office or in a cube. So Martha, would love to just hear from you on whether you've dealt with it and how you recommend overcoming it.
All the time. I think we all do, even if we're not aware of it. There are moments where I think about all those jobs at American early in my career. I had to psych myself up that I was the best person for the job. And I remember this particular moment when I was a supervisor in our res office in Tucson, Arizona. And I was one of 60-some res supervisors there. And there was a job opening to be a supervisor at the airport. Now, I'd done those airport jobs, the fleet service clerk job, and then the airport agents that you check in with when you board at the gate. And so I had a good chance at it from an experience perspective, but I literally got a phone call from a guy in Dallas who said, Martha, don't even bother to put in for that. Like, Dwayne's got it. Dwayne's been filling in for that job. He's got that job. So first of all, my first lesson is, like, go for it anyway, because, keep them honest. And that's kind of where I managed my own expectations, and then I psyched myself up, and I went and interviewed, and I ended up getting it. And then it was like one of those, oh shit moments, right? Like I got it. Now what do I do? Because I didn't know, and this is a huge airport. I had not, I'd been at this little tiny hub in Raleigh, and now I was at DFW where it has its own zip code, and the fact that any flight gets out on time is still remarkable to me. And here's the other piece is when you get to that scared place, reach out. Because when you get to the second guessing yourself moments, and by the way, that happened every time I got a new job, which was a lot because we move people around a lot, where you have to psych yourself up to convince yourself so you can sell yourself. And then when you do, you realize, wow, what if this is bigger than I'm capable of doing? And it's really about reaching out and not being afraid to ask for help. So the last piece of that is when I got the general manager job in Oklahoma City, I think I got it quite candidly because the company had put in place some diversity goals, and the senior VP of customer service wasn't going to get his bonus that year if he didn't put some females out in the field. Just to be quite frank, that was at least my conclusion because I was one of 3 women who were hired in the last quarter of the year before the bonuses were paid. And I remember, I was in Indy yesterday, by the way, visiting the Herff Jones folks, and I remember not even knowing where Indianapolis was, but I got offered, you can go to Indianapolis or Oklahoma City. And I was like, well, I'm from the South. That's too cold for me up there. And so I picked Oklahoma City. Now, had no idea, I didn't do any research, but I ended up getting a team of supervisors. The guy that had been there for his 25 years of his career, he took me under his wing and he taught me everything I knew, and I was so afraid. I got the job and I've never done this. I've got maintenance to deal with and pilots and flight attendants, all of those things. And I was scared to death, but I wasn't afraid to say I don't know and I need some help. And so if you're ever in that situation, reach out to a peer, build those, people stay at companies because they have best friends there and they have a community, right? So reach out to the people beside you and say, I've never done this before. Can you help? And it's amazing. I've already experienced that here. I've just been here literally, I'm starting week 5. I've already had so many people say to me, how can I help you? And I'm now not afraid to reach out. But this is a little scary for me. It's a new business. It's a new industry. I just have realized we've got great people here, and we're going to make each other successful.
You covered that perfectly, Martha. All right, this next one, a little softer, but super relevant to all of us, Meredith. We just want to hear how you've managed work boundaries here. I know your job's 24/7, being out in the field, managing a team and customers. So how do you set those boundaries?
For me, the boundary is kind of twofold. It's a work-life balance, and then from a work standpoint, I've come to realize that there's only so much that you can control in a day, or in a year, or in a week, or as you stated earlier, and you can only be responsible for what you can control, and you judge yourself, or anyway I do. At the end of the day, I rate myself on what I could control that day. So if you've got projects, or you've got something that a superior or someone else is asking you to work on, and they haven't given you clear, guidelines or clear direction, and you just aren't sure, rather than sitting and waiting for them to give you more direction, it would be speaking up, and you have to pick the right setting. And I will say, I started here really young, and I didn't always pick the right setting. So I want you to know I've grown up in this company, and I've learned how to pick the right setting. It's just to say, this is how I operate, this is how I work, and I need you to tell me this is where I want, are we going in this direction, or are we going in this direction? So it's just, I think, again, being spoken, being present, being heard, and letting them know. And you can only do as much as you can do. And at the end of the day, that's what you have to live with and be happy with, and be satisfied with. From a work-life balance, I am in the field, so my phone never stops ringing, and I still struggle with that balance. I have learned to pick up on these stinky eye looks from the spouse, like put the phone down, it's dinner, or it's 10 o'clock, and I work, with the passion piece, is I know that someone on the other end of that phone is trying to get a job done, and at the end of the day, it's the customer that keeps us all in business. So I want to make sure that I don't have someone that needs me. So it's still a struggle for me to realize I've got 4 other people at home that need me too, and for them to know that they're just as important, and really more important, as what I do from 12 to 12. So that still is a work in progress for me. So I'll let somebody else. I'll hand that off, because you probably don't want to take my advice on that. So
I appreciate the honesty. Any ads on just managing boundaries, work and life, general? Has anyone nailed it?
No,
Okay,
there is
let's
no
all feel
nailing
good
it.
about
That's
it.
all I was going to say. There's no such thing. I think it's a fallacy. There's no such thing as work-life balance. There's harmony, and there are going to be all kinds of moments where it's out of balance, one way or the other, quite candidly, because we have things in our life that are all-consuming and that we need to be present for. So if you think about that, it's just finding the harmony. So maybe back to your first question around how do you start your day with intention, it's just it's acknowledging and being aware, and not waiting for the stinky eye, because I get that too sometimes, and recognizing when you need to shift the balance, because it's out of balance. It's out of harmony.
it's a magical unicorn, and when you find it, capture it.
You'll be rich.
Sydney, this next question's for you, and it's about the corporate ladder. Have you been faced with disappointments in your pursuit of climbing the corporate ladder? How have you dealt with it? And then any helpful tips to kind of shake off disappointment?
Yes, 100% have had disappointments along the way, or unexpected turns. So I love the rock wall analogy, because I feel like that's how my career has gone. And there have been times where I didn't get a role that I really thought, this is mine. I remember one experience in particular. I nailed this interview to the point I had the 2 VPs at that time come to me, and they were like, "You rocked it. We're going up to recommend you be interviewed at the chief officer, with the chief officer at the time." I didn't get that interview at all. So, but here's what I learned from that, right, is a lot of this is really around what do you take away. So I have a rule of thumb that I just follow. I get 1 day to wallow. That's it. And then more importantly is I go get feedback from either the person who, in that particular instance, the chief operating officer. I went and got feedback from him as well as the VPs to see, is there anything that I can be working on now so that when this opportunity would come up again, it would just be a no-brainer, that I would be ready for it, right? Because there are times that we think we're ready for roles, and right, wrong, or indifferent, that may be true, but maybe not, right? And it's really around what do we take away, and how do we ultimately learn from that experience and, continue to elevate our performance. So I remember this particular role. I was like, well, I'm going to show up tomorrow and I'm going to show them what they're missing out on, right? But that's how I've always approached this is do not let yourself wallow for an extended period of time, because all that does is hurt you, right? Our industry is so small that how you react to challenges or obstacles or opportunities that maybe you didn't get, that will resonate with people more in the long term. Your reputation and how you handle conflict, like that is what you should be known for, right? And so that's really where I really don't let me, or if my team doesn't get a role, like we get one day and then we move on and we figure out how we can be better tomorrow.
This next one is one of my favorite questions, and Martha, you're the best to answer this just with your rich background and all of the roles you've had in HR. And I'm gonna have to read it because Will Wells just put it so perfectly. What has been the most monumental shift you've seen ranging from when you began your career to present day in terms of starting to give women more opportunity in leadership roles?
At a high level, it's not a zero-sum game. Like early in my career, I remember candidly preferring to work for men than women because it felt like it was a competition constantly. There were so few women in the operations side at the airlines that when I did get opportunities, it always felt like we were kind of elbowing each other out. So the shift I've seen is the movement to support. And there is enough room for all of us, right? There is opportunity all over the place. And if we will just find a way to pour in and give to others, that it's like it's an abundance mentality instead of a scarcity mentality. And that's the shift I've seen, because early in my career, I grew up in an environment where I felt like I needed to do that. And candidly, it didn't serve me very well, very often. And it's been really, really encouraging, particularly from my point of view, having led HR in the last 3 companies before joining Varsity Brands, to see how that's evolved. And really, the best leaders are the ones that want to give everybody a chance. When you build diverse teams, when you build a team around the table that has, and I mean beyond ethnicity and gender, I mean differing perspectives and differing experiences, that's just the start. And I think in the early days, we thought that was it. That's all we had to do. We actually have to bring them together, and then we have to create the environment where their voices are heard and acted on. And so that's where I want the next shift to be. So you didn't ask that part of the question, but that's what I'm looking for, is, now it's a support. I've seen that shift. I want to see us make sure we're doing our jobs as leaders to create the kind of environment where every voice gets heard.
This next one's Sydney. Pretend that you're sitting next to your 25-year-old self, and you want to give her the best advice you can for the next however many years, which was actually just a year ago, so.
It's totally a year ago. Yeah, that list would be long, but I think, when I think about this, I would really boil it down to a couple of things. One would be, it's gonna be fine. So I remember at 25, I was super anxious and didn't know how to enter the career world because I was still in school, and being just I don't even know how to go about this and I'm totally gonna fail, right? So I have a fear of failure at 25. So I would say it's all gonna be all right. And the second thing would be, as we think, sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but it would really be around take risks and trust your gut. So I have taken roles that I knew was not the right thing for me, and it backfired big time. So as I think, we all know ourselves, and we know when the opportunity is right. You just know it's in your gut that you really got to rely on that. So I've taken promotions, and I knew I shouldn't have, because just the experience wasn't going to be right for me. And every time I've been right. So I think those would be the couple of things for my 25-year-old self. Just calm down, girl. It'll be okay. and trust your gut and be tenacious along the way.
Anyone else want to give advice to their 25-year-old self?
Mine would honestly be to have more fun. I was 25 and graduating from law school. I was working 12, 14-hour days, like nose in a book. I forget who said it earlier, but people want to work with people they enjoy working with. And when like you're at the water cooler and I'm just there to get a glass of water so I can run back and get my nose in the book again and can't talk about the latest TV show or pop culture, it doesn't really make you the person that people want to work with.
I would say less beer, more sleep. I was close to 25 when I started here, and I would say kind of just what I said earlier. Don't be afraid to let people know what you want to do. Just because you're 25 doesn't mean that you can't do great things and you can't be a part of a department that you didn't think you were fit for or that you maybe haven't earned because you have that imposter syndrome, whatever the case may be. If you want it, go get it. Because I'll tell you, looking back on that long gap, it's the regret and just going, God, I really wish I should have, or this, that, whatever the case may be. We have a great company. We get a lot of opportunity that's not just based here in Dallas. So if it were me at 25, I'd say if you don't have a concrete tie like 3 hostages holding you here, then leave. Go try something different within our company that's not here to give you a different perspective, and just a well-rounded sense. You can always come back. That's the thing, as long as you don't burn that. Don't leave the company. But if we've got an opportunity in a different state, even if it's cold, you can learn how to build a snowman that's not dirty. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. So there's a lot of things that I would have done differently too. So don't regret.
I'll second the take risks. I was older than 25 when I ended up at the NFL, but I moved to a different state to take a temporary job. Like that was a big risk, and it worked out well for me. And a lot of
Moved
people
to Dallas.
That too.
Martha, this question's for you. Another corporate ladder one, but have you ever dealt with colleagues trying to bring you down while climbing the corporate ladder? Can you explain a situation and describe what steps you took to resolve?
I shared a little bit of that before, just in a generic way. I will tell you, when I was running HR down the street at Bell Helicopter, which was a part of a broader organization of brands, so they had a parent company and sister company similar to us. I remember having a distinct moment where I felt like the relationship with the head of ops was really tenuous. And I got to the place where I convinced myself that he wasn't trustworthy, and I think he had convinced himself that I wasn't. And so we weren't really working very effectively together. And that was the summer, I remember it distinctly because my daughter was 5 at the time, and I was negotiating the labor agreement that ended in a 6-week strike that year, the longest strike in the nation and the first strike that the organization had had. So it was not exactly a pleasurable year, just on all fronts. And I remember feeling like I was absolutely focused on what the organization, I felt like, charged me with to achieve. But I was heads down, and I wasn't in balance by any stretch, certainly wasn't even in harmony from a work-life perspective. I missed half my daughter's 5th year of life that I now have regret around. But what I remember was, after that was all over, and my boss, I had 2 bosses, which we all often have, right? At least 2. The boss from the parent company flew me up to Canada and had a conversation with me and essentially expressed, like, here's where I'm disappointed that you didn't get these things achieved or done in this way. And I remember being so deflated because I had poured myself into that assignment. And my first reaction was to think, well, it's that ops guy. I'm sure, because he had a relationship with him and used to work. So, I jumped to that conclusion and ran right up my ladder of inference, propped it right against the wall and scurried right up it. And I remember at this, a week later, at this moment in my office, I was kind of tearful and frustrated. And guess who walks? The head of ops. And that's the last person I wanted to see in that moment. And if you've ever had those experiences, you feel like it's just palpable. And I had a choice in that moment to extend trust and just let the walls down, or build more walls. And I decided to let the walls down. And that guy, by the way, and I ended up having the most fantastic relationship. And he told me a year before he retired, because in that culture, if you told somebody, you were sort of gone the next day. So he was very guarded. And I remember how powerful it was to, in those moments, and it's the hardest thing to do, is to extend trust when you don't have it and you're not feeling it back, but that's actually how you build it. And so I would just tell you from that experience, it was really difficult. And I spent 7 years there, and luckily the last 3 were fantastic because I had a wonderful partner beside me. And part of it was both he and I were coming to conclusions about each other's intentions that just weren't true. So to my earlier point about assume positive intention, that's been sort of my key takeaway from that experience, is I sort of listened to the voice inside my head, which honestly didn't have all the facts. And instead, I now start with, even if there's a lot of data that suggests I shouldn't believe this, I'm going to choose to believe this. Because I believe everybody gets up every day wanting to do their very best and contribute in a meaningful way. And so if they'll assume that about me, it's a really great thing to assume it about them. So I learned a lot.
I guess I'll share one quick story. As you think about this, so my first boss out of college, I worked at a sports marketing company. And literally every idea I had, she would pawn off as her own and get credit for it. And I remember just feeling so disheartened by that. So I started feeding her really bad ideas just to see if she'd take them up the ladder and get fired. It didn't work. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, it took a while for me to figure out that you can only control you. You can't control anybody else around you. And so I thought to myself, well, if I make her look really good, regardless of who's getting credit for the ideas, that one day I'd have my day in court and I'd get discovered, so to speak, and everything would be okay. And so I think the lesson for me early on was, don't worry about stuff that you can't control. Focus on stuff that you can control. Do an incredible job, and 9 times out of 10, you'll be discovered and everything will work out.
So last question, we just have a few minutes left, but it's a good one, and I think it wraps us up really well. And it's about kind of building your brand. So Jared, this is you. Any helpful tips on how to stand out in your current role, which I really see that as building your brand around you. And even if you don't have the experience for a job you want to go after, how do you position yourself for it?
Yeah, so I think hitting the first question first, things to do to stand out. First and foremost, I think show a genuine curiosity to learn. Don't be afraid to ask a ton of questions. The people that I've worked with or that have worked on my team that ask a lot of questions or are genuinely inquisitive, try to figure out what's going on, I think are the people that have gone further. So I think that's one. 2, don't just take your assignments and do them and move on. So I think you can get pretty wrapped up in your task sheet and you do it well, and even if you do a great job, it's almost like, think like that's expected. You're expected to do your tasks that you're assigned to. How do you go above and beyond? What's an area where maybe it's not on your day-to-day responsibility list, but you could take on a project, and that's how you can really stand out. I think that the third thing for me, always have an opinion. So wallpaper is not good, and I think that just having an opinion, coming to a meeting with a point of view, to me is a good thing. And it doesn't mean you have to speak up and go crazy, but I think leaders and managers want to know what you think, or else you wouldn't be on the team. So don't be afraid to share that. Does anybody else want to add to that stuff before we kind of move on to the second question?
I just kind of look at what I said earlier too, just let people know that you're interested. I mean, once you get in the door, whoever said education may get you in the door, but it doesn't mean that's where you have to land and stay and die for some of us. You figure out, I really do have an interest over here and I don't have any background, but getting in there and talking to those people that you have a genuine interest. I mean, I'm in sales, but I got an interest in a lot of different pieces of this company. And I don't know that I'll ever have the opportunity to work in them, but at least I'd go and learn about them so I can find a way to try to apply it. But I think reading the job descriptions is one thing, but going and actually talking to the people who are creating the job description and really figuring out, do I have what it takes? Like, sometimes it's tenacity and hard work and things like that they're really looking for, and there's only a couple of things that you really have to have from experience or education-wise. So they don't know what they don't know until you tell them.
So just quick thoughts on how to climb the ladder. I think the biggest misconception here is that opportunity is just going to fall in your lap. And if someone talked about it, I think a few of us talked about it. You've really got to go after what you want. You've got to make your objectives known and then go after it. So think to yourself, like, when's the last time you sat down and wrote on a piece of paper what your ideal job description would be? Are you doing that right now? Could you present that to your boss? What are you really passionate about? And it's not that they're just going to say, oh, we'll create that role for you tomorrow, but at least they know. At least they know what you want, and you've been proactive in kind of sharing with management what gets you excited, what gets you motivated, and maybe there's one thing on that list that you can start doing today. So I think being really proactive is really, really important in terms of moving up. The second thing, and Martha talked about this a little bit, raise your hand for assignments or jobs that take you out of your comfort zone and that no one else wants. If people can see you raising your hand for stuff that no one else is raising their hand for, it immediately sets you apart. You're willing to do anything to learn, to grow, to help the company. So those are, I think, a couple things that can help on the ladder front. And then I think as it relates to applying for jobs you don't have experience for, so think about exactly what you want to go do, and then figure out how to kind of do certain things within that area of expertise in your day job that might show that you've got some experience in it. So for example, if you're in marketing and you eventually want to go into finance, which is never going to happen, but maybe it would. Sorry, Gary, if he's here. But think about like what you can do from a marketing perspective to show that you've got analytical ability. Pick out things or people and go sit down and talk to them. Ask them if they'll give you advice, mentoring. Another tip, don't be afraid to ask to go to meetings that you weren't invited to. So this was advice that someone gave me a long time ago, and I mean, you're never going to get to go to meetings you don't ask to go to. It's okay. Like, hey, can I sit in on this meeting? I learned so much early in my marketing career from sitting in meetings that I was never invited to. I was just a fly on the wall. And so don't be afraid to kind of speak up and ask to go to things that really interest you.
Well, I just have to urge everyone here, if you're not part of WERC, please go sign up online. Website's up there. You can just email me directly. I'll get you signed up. Make sure you get all the communications. We also have a group on LinkedIn. Our group posts every Tuesday, Wednesday on advice, tips, articles to read, and then any upcoming events. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions, and big thank you for this panel giving all their expert advice and wisdom to us.